LSD rooms.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa and here's what I have today. This is a Stranger Things edition. So I made this, which is 11's Tower of Waffles. Jelly beans, Reese's Pieces, chocolate chips. And then to go along with it, I have a retro soda. Can of cherry soda that I found. And a special mug to go along with it. So by the time I'm done eating all this, I should be able to find the upside down. Go get a strange snack and let's get into the spooky videos. Today's theme is the Montauk Project. First story, and I have no idea how I'm going to eat these waffles on camera.
This is part 3 of the real-life experiments that inspired Stranger Things. Let's talk about the Montauk experiments. Which, fun fact, Stranger Things was originally going to be named Montauk. And this is the real-life Hawkins lab. The Montauk Project allegedly ran from the late 1960s to the 1980s. And it picked up right where MK Ultra left off. Check out my other videos on MK Ultra. This is Camp Hero in Montauk, New York, where the experiments took place. It was a Cold War military base that was used for radar, surveillance, and then weapons testing. Allegedly, they kidnapped or recruited children, did a bunch of mind control on them, tested psychic abilities, all that stuff. And then they tried to do time travel, and they tried to open interdimensional portals. One of the most famous claims was about the Montauk chair. A child would sit in the chair surrounded by electronics. Her thoughts were then allegedly amplified and made real. They would see creatures and objects, stuff out of their nightmares. One person apparently saw a creature so real that it saw the creature attack other people in the lab. And this is where the Demogorgon comes in. I think the scariest part is the stories about time travel and interdimensional portals. If you haven't looked into Project Sunshine, oh my gosh, that's gonna be the next video.
I was never supposed to be talking about this, but lately it's been eating me up. They told us it was a radar research facility. That was the official line. I was stationed at a remote facility on the East Coast as part of a classified project that involved high-level signal processing. I worked with the Navy before they pulled me into this, flying us in at night, warning us not to ask questions. We signed NDAs thicker than textbooks, and all we knew was to keep our heads down. At first it seemed routine, just data, frequencies, electromagnetic fields, but then things began to spiral. They built a device they called the chair. It was designed to amplify psychic abilities, so they say. I didn't buy into it until I saw the kids. They brought in a handful of boys between the ages of 10 to 13 years old. They told us they were special, gifted. And one of them, the boy, he could focus his mind and make things materialize. I thought it was a trick until I saw it for myself. One day a soldier was standing near the chair when the boy was hooked in. The soldier started bleeding from his ears. No explanation, no one could make sense of it. Then came the jump test. 1 minute the boy was in the room, the next he was gone. No sign, no trace, just vanished. Sometimes he'd come back minutes later, other times hours. When he'd come back, it looked like he'd been somewhere else, somewhere terrible. But the worst was August 12th. August 12th was when timelines fractured, radio frequencies scrambled, and clocks stopped. While the boy was strapped into the chair, under his breath he kept saying, "The beast, the beast, the beast." And then it appeared, not in the lab, but outside the facility. It was 9 to 12 feet tall, glowing red eyes, vaguely humanoid, but because it struggled to hold a stable form, it was difficult to tell. Some said it had fur, fangs, claws, but really that just depended on who was looking at it. It caused physical damage. It tore through fences, smashed equipment, and left footprints in the concrete before vanishing. To cope, some said it was just an hallucination, but I remember the ground shaking. I remember the hysteria. After that, they told us the program was shut down. But if you take a walk near the old radar towers, near the SEAL bunkers, sometimes at night you can still hear it. A hum, a voice in your head that doesn't belong to you. Something was open, and I don't think it was ever truly closed, said Preston Nichols. Preston Nichols was an electrical engineer that was tasked with the development and operation of the Montauk chair. If stories like this interest you, be sure to give me a follow because I enjoy having these type of discussions too.
More from Preston Nichols.
You would have to target each person individually. The individual targeting worked very well. Then it was discovered that since basically the project was nothing but a mind amplifier, that's all it was a mind amplifier. If the person in the input network could think of other times and fully flesh out the time in his head, this machine had the capability of generating that time, generating a vortex of different space and time. And that's what the Montauk Project eventually evolved into, a time machine. And yes, it worked. It didn't work all that well, but it worked. You know, many people got lost, but it did work. That, in a nutshell, is what the Montauk Project is about. Of course, there's all sorts of information on the net. There's, you can get my book, Montauk Project Experiments in Time, and the other sequels, which are just a bunch of...
Next video.
What would you say to the people who say, well, you know, all these children were kidnapped and murdered and you were a part of it? What would you tell them if they said, well, you know, they're trying to say, well, you were part of this, you approved of this? What would you
I
tell them?
did approve of it, but there was nothing I could do about it.
I was told that over the 13 years of the project, there were as many as 300,000 that were used in the experimentation. Of that amount, I was told less than 1% survived, and of that less than 1%, very few were able to function in society.
How many do you think in that period of time, let's say between, what was it, 1971, roughly?
72,
72 to
maybe
83.
80.
So how many do you think, approximately?
Probably at Montauk itself, at least 10,000.
Between a minimum figure of 10,000 and a possible maximum figure of 100,000. Because Long Island was not the only point where they were brainwashing these kids and setting up the Montauk Boys programs. Eventually they wound up in every major city in the U.S.
That's actually a small number. Do you know that in this day and age, that there are over 5 million people a year that vanish off the face of the earth without a trace? So 300,000 over the course of 13 years is quite insignificant.
Put it this way. If you're sitting there with 20 guns pointed at you, what are you going to do? Whatever the hell they want! First of all, I have the self-preservation instinct, like every one of us has. And getting shot hurts. I can tell you that from personal experience. And I don't want to be hurt. If you're going to kill me, okay, kill me, you son of a bitch. I bore fear being hurt and laying in a hospital for years in pain.
So, in other words, you were forced to do this. This was against your will.
Initially, it wasn't. But I really had no way out of it.
Okay, next video. This is awful.
You want to hear one of my favorite emerging theories that honestly it makes me feel a little bit better if this is true, but it is a little scary, right? Because one of them is actually very much rooted in truth and, you know, documents you can find on CIA.gov, right? Because of the Freedom of Information Act. But so right now I'm watching a documentary. I'm only like halfway through because I have kids, so I have to wait for them all to go to bed for me to be able to watch it when I want, because it's scary, right? About the Montauk Project, okay? It's called the Montauk Chronicles, and it's on Tubi. So, yeah, say what you want about Tubi, but obviously they're not going to put this shit on a whole lot of streaming platforms. But they put this one on there about a guy who literally went to film school, and he got really interested and, like, hyper-obsessed with Camp Hero, the Montauk Project. And keep in mind, for those of you who have any idea, no idea what I'm talking about, this is what Stranger Things is based off of. Montauk, New York is where they had basically a rogue agency or a rogue group of people from the government, which this fucking documentary that I'm watching gives a whole new perspective because it's merging together multiple other conspiracies that I've already gone down researching for months at a time, right? Everything I'm about to say from here on out is for entertainment purposes only, okay? Project Monarch, MK Ultra, where they basically traumatize people until the brain splits. Your brain naturally can make it split through trauma. Think bipolar depression. You have to have, a lot of times, the genetics for it, or you have to have the trauma for it. One or the other, right? Basically, in that project, they would traumatize these children. Think about the GATE program. They would try to find children initially through school systems, okay? that had these abilities. They did the sound, and I even took these tests. So that's another reason why, you know, I've always been interested in like spiritual, occult, you know, all kinds of crazy shit. Like I literally used to keep a file on like the Loch Ness Monster, about aliens when I was like 9, 10, 11, okay? The Bermuda Triangle, like just things that always, like, my brain was like, I even was tested for the Gifted and Talented program. I remember the flashcards where they had shapes, okay? This all comes back into play in this fucking documentary that I didn't put all these together. So, Project Monarch, MK Ultra. Traumatizing children. Think about the show Severance, you guys. When I watched Severance, it really fucked me up because I was like, this is literally the best way they can use it is for people to be traumatized. They create the splits in your brain. Think of a honeycomb. Multiple personalities, like in Severance, right? And you don't remember each one, okay? You don't remember all the other personalities, and they want to see how far they can push the human psyche. So they would go and get these kids, whether it's from programs, or they would find kids whose parents were like, you know, drug addicts or homeless kids, or kids that like fit genetic criteria from like genetic testing, maybe how they got people's genetics, maybe from hospital from birth. Who knows, right? They would take these children, they would traumatize them, right? And simultaneously, multiple people that did not know each other said that it could have been a number anywhere from 10,000 to 300,000 children from 1973 to 1980. Okay, stay with me, because just because it ended in 1980 doesn't mean jack shit. Okay, they said it would get as much torture as like rape, as physical harm. Think to a point to where you would just give up and you would disassociate. Let's take a pause. Now, there's a split, right? When you would disassociate, you're basically, you know, when I read about energy, your body basically, you're leaving your body. You become an observer of your body at that point, right? They would then use certain frequencies that would align with certain points in space-time, which also can relate to Epstein, okay? And once they would play these frequencies for them, when they are in this altered, disassociated state, they said entities or alien-like beings, right? And a lot of these children would have experiences with seeing entities or having memories of being abducted, right? Would then be used as a vessel, right? They said these were not handlers that were torturing them and doing stuff. They called them programmers. They were programming them to be vessels for interdimensional beings. Think about Stranger Things. When she started to talk, think about Vecna. Think about, even the theory was that eventually, you know, the overall theory of the Montauk Project was that eventually a monster, a physical being, came through time-space, like ripped open through time-space and came through. Then they shut all that shit down. Okay? So, these children, they said only 1% survived. 99% were killed or died, right? Whether from starvation, hyperfixation, or not hyperfixation, asphyxiation. They're choking them, they were drowning them, doing all kinds of horrific shit to see how much they could take and stay alive, because these were the strongest ones that they were able to break into multiple personalities. Then they would program the personalities, let these entities be vessels for them without even remembering, because think Severance. When you go back to your normal personality, you don't know what you did in the other personality. Okay? So they said that they were programmers programming these human brains, okay? And the backstory is that the people that were rogue from the government, this was after World War II, and these were people who worked for the U.S. government that used to be German soldiers. And there's a whole rabbit hole, you know, I'm sure most of y'all, if y'all are here right now listening to all of this, you understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about. They were very interested in occult practices and gaining technology. They were already talking about technology and working with what they believed was an alien, which I believe they're interdimensional entities that are not here for our highest good. There's a bid going on for our consciousness, right? Or for our bodies as vessels. Think about even, what's his name? He's on Joe Rogan. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's been on a bunch of other ones. He's been talking about this and that he worked in, not Area 51, but the more secretive one that's over there. Fuck, I can't remember his name, and I don't
Bob
want to get off
Lazar?
track. But he said that, like, he was being interviewed back in, like, I want to say it was, like, the 90s, maybe the 80s, where they were like, what's the number one thing, like, the number one
think it was
scariest
Bob
thing that, like,
Lazar.
you heard that, you know, the public would be most in fear about? And he said how they referred to us. And they were like, what do you mean? How these aliens, right? He worked for the fucking government. How these aliens referred to us. How did they... Bob Lazar, that's his name. Ding, ding, ding. They referred to us as vessels.
Here we are at Battery 113. This is the battery that we mentioned in the episode where Joe Lafreno claimed that he was brought underground with other boys for the Montauk Project.
Under hypnosis, Joe remembered being brought to this battery as a teen by an unknown kid on their bikes, and that they were brought underground through Battery 113. All of the sealed over doors we're showing are part of Battery 113.
Seeing this in video, so you can kind of get a grasp of just how big this is. Photos don't do it justice.
Yeah, no, no.
It's definitely
It
creepy.
is so big.
Oh my gosh.
So
You
big.
gotta give it that.
Wow.
Like they're doing on a military base. This is not done by kids, it's too neat. This says they had chemical mind control out here at some point. Of course, there's not much of a stretch of the imagination to go to electromagnetic mind control from chemical mind control. These rooms probably go back to the 60s.
This building was one of the barracks. It's where all the soldiers would stay while they were stationed at Camp Hero. I've been inside once. It's pretty destroyed. Pretty basic.
Go inside the barracks now.
Wow.
This is the general kitchen area used in the barracks.
Oh.
This is also a living room. We're now looking in the rooms. You can see it's all carpeted. This was actually a plush barrack. There was one or two beds in each room. The officers had a single bed room.
So this right here was the bowling alley.
Write me a comment. Do you think the Montauk Project is real or no? Just a conspiracy theory. What do you think?
The Montauk Project, a name whispered in hushed tones, a conspiracy theory shrouded in secrecy. It centers around Camp Hero, a decommissioned military base on the eastern tip of Long Island. Locals always felt uneasy about the place. Stories circulated about strange experiments. Something just felt off. The official story? Radar experiments during the Cold War. But many believe it was a front. They claim the government used Camp Hero for something far more sinister, something that would shatter our understanding of reality. The Montauk Project allegedly involved mind control, time travel, and even contact with extraterrestrials. It's a tale so bizarre, so outlandish, that it has captivated conspiracy theorists for decades.
This is the mysterious military base all the way at the end of Long Island in Montauk that was the main inspiration for the TV show Stranger Things. But it's involved in a series of conspiracies. What happened here and why is it abandoned? Camp Hero, or the Montauk Air Force Station, was first built in 1942 as a defensive measure against a German invasion from the sea. This base, about 120 miles away from New York City, was disguised to look like a fishing village from above. Right here, something fascinating that was hinted also in Stranger Things. A sealed door. Well, these were artillery guns concealed in 600 feet of concrete. That was in order to prevent any aerial attacks, first from the Germans during World War II and then later during the Cold War. But these guns became obsolete. So these doors were sealed. I wonder why, if there's more to this story. In 1960, this radar tower was put up, meant to be part of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, providing our American military with a 30-minute warning of any missile attack. Officially, many systems were developed or tested here, like magnetic memory for computers, wide area networks, keyboards, and E-pens. Security was intense, but then in 1981, these radar systems became defunct, and the base was decommissioned. And then in 1984, the General Services Administration attempted to sell this entire base to real estate developers, but locals protested, and instead it became a state park. That is the official story, but there were rumors spread of a secret network of tunnels below, which were the location of experiments on the human mind, on time travel, and psychic abilities. This became a national sensation in 1992 with the book titled The Montauk Project, written by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. It went into intricate details of what allegedly happened here in Camp Hero. They wrote about interdimensional portals being built inside these bases that might be right underneath our feet right now. And with these portals, they went to another dimension, and apparently they brought something back. And this monster ended up taking over the base, and they had to seal the base completely and abandon it. However, the authors themselves said that the book could be read as fiction or non-fiction, so its validity is dubious. But it isn't completely out of left field, because there was a project led by the CIA that was confirmed from declassified documents to have conducted covert administration of psychoactive drugs to people who never consented to these experimentations. This was a very real project called MK Ultra, and it lasted from 1953 to 1973. But the interesting thing is, we're here on July 4th weekend, and there's probably thousands of people right now in Montauk, but as we're walking around here in Camp Hero, it's empty. Let me know, do you think the conspiracies are true, or was it something more mundane, like an invasion of ticks? Stay curious, my friends. This is the mysterious.
Most people know this place as Camp Hero in Montauk, but this abandoned radar tower is tied to one of Long Island's wildest legends. Back in the 1940s, this base was built to defend the coastline during World War II and later upgraded during the Cold War. But the real mystery comes after it closed. That's when stories started circulating about something called the Montauk Project. Secret government experiments, mind control, time travel, even kids supposedly taken for psychological testing. It all centered around this radar tower, known as the ANFPS-35. Locals swear they could hear it humming for miles. None of the conspiracy claims were ever proven, but the stories grew so big that it inspired the original concept for Stranger Things. Yep, before Hawkins, before 11, the show was literally called Montauk. Whether you believe the rumors or not, this tower is one of the most eerie, iconic structures on Long Island, and the perfect reminder that sometimes truth and legend get a little tangled, but here at the edge of New York.
Long Island is the real site of Stranger Things. Welcome to Camp Hero. This abandoned military base in Montauk is where the wild rumors started. Government experiments, psychic kids, mind control, basically everything Stranger Things pulled from. What most people don't know is that the show wasn't even meant to be in Indiana. The original script was literally called Montauk, based on this exact place. Locals debate how much of it is real, but the fact is the government did classified projects here during the Cold War, and that's where all the theories began. Whether you believe the stories or not, exploring Camp Hero feels like stepping into a real-life Hawkins. Follow for more Long Island and New York hidden history.
Wow.
But the truth about the Montauk Project isn't hidden behind a curtain. It's buried under millions of tons of concrete. Most people who visit Camp Hero see the radar tower and the bluffs, but they are actually standing on the roof of a 12-level subterranean complex. We are starting with Level 1, the buffer zone. Level 1 was designed to hide exotic experiments in plain sight. It consists of the massive reinforced concrete bunkers known as Battery 113 and 216. During the height of the Cold War, these weren't just for coastal defense. They were repurposed into the intake center for the Montauk boys. This level contained high-security reception areas, medical screening rooms, and the primary power distribution grids that fed the more dangerous experiments deeper underground. Deep in the wooded perimeter of Level 1 stands a building that shouldn't exist, the LSD House. While the government claims the base was once disguised as a fishing village to hide from spies, researchers found rooms inside this house with checkerboard floors and vibrant, psychedelic patterned wallpaper. This wasn't for decor, it was for de-patterning, the initial stage of breaking a subject's mind using high-frequency electromagnetic waves and chemical hallucinogens. It was here, on the threshold of Level 1, where the first psychic leaks began. Before the entity known as the Beast from the ID could fully manifest in the lower labs, Level 1 acted as the psychic shield. But as the power increased at the radar tower, the walls of Level 1 began to bleed, leaving behind eerie electrical signatures that still baffle hikers today. Level 1 was just the cover story. Level 2 is where the specialized labs began and where the first biological remnants were housed. I am dropping the Level 2 archives next. Stay curious.
Extremely creepy.
LSD rooms. Holy shit.
Continuing on with Stranger Things, a very disturbing part of the story of my connection to it was that my father, a prominent doctor in New York, in the suburbs of New York, Westchester County, head of a hospital, chief of cardiology, but also the head of a psychiatric hospital, the head physician for a psychiatric hospital in Harrison, New York, when we were kids. And later in his life, I prodded him a lot. I said, you know, there's a lot of talk about kids young men being taken out of psychiatric hospitals, guys who were a complete loss, they couldn't help them, and being put into the Army MK Ultra programs. And my father always blew it off. But as he got older, finally right toward the end, when he's still clear in his head, Helen and I were talking to him one day. I said, do you know anything about this? Because they're saying people came out of Westchester in a psychiatric hospital, and there's only one or two in Westchester. And my father said, well, the men that were chosen for that, he just started talking like the young men that were chosen were incorrigible. They were useless. Couldn't do anything with them. They were, homeless people, drug addicts, stuff like that, these young men. And I said, so you're aware of this? He got very annoyed. He goes, yeah, they were the worst of the worst. Those are the ones who went into the program. Like, shocking, both of us. And so that was it. So MK Ultra, Fort Hero, Montauk, New York, under the lighthouse. The remnants of it are still there. And crazy stuff. Stranger Things.
Thank you for joining me today. Take care of yourselves. See you next time. Bye.